This is 2007's bloodrayne 2 Deliverance. Warning, spoilers ahead. We open up with a title sequence that shows the progression of time since the end of the first film. Now we find ourselves in the Wild West, and we come to a lonesome cabin in the middle of the prairie. Inside, a family finishes dinner, and one of the kids asks him to tell them a story. Something seems wrong with the dad, though. Mother pours him a cup of coffee, and they talk about how late in the season the snow is still falling. Suddenly, horses can be heard outside, and the dad thinks that it's bears. He grabs his gun and loads it, and heads outside to help the horses. After the dad leaves, the mother senses something outside, and the kids start to get worried too. Just then, the horses go silent, and no one answers outside. Then the mother thinks that it's a good idea to leave the kids inside and walk out the door empty-handed. The dad just talked about how he thinks that it's bears. What's she really going to do to help at this point? At least grab a kitchen knife or a lantern, anything. Once the kids are alone, they hear what sounds like footsteps on the roof, and they quickly hide under the bed. The footsteps get closer, and soon the door opens. A man in boots makes his way across the floor, and he sits on the bed. The kids watch the stranger make his way around the house, and he calls out to them, asking if they're sad. The man's lackeys come in, and he has them grab the kids from under the bed. Back in town, we see the sheriff is leaving the saloon, and he greets the mayor. The mayor tells a reporter that Deliverance is one of the quietest towns in the West, but the reporter hopes that something big will start happening. The vampire cowboys make it to the saloon where two girls are woken up upstairs, and the lackeys drop in and snatch them from under the bartender's nose. They drag the girls and their mother out into the streets, and they start to leave town. Just then, the sheriff comes out into the street, and he tells them to return the children immediately. Well, the vampire doesn't listen, and the sheriff starts to shoot him. To his surprise, the vampire keeps walking toward him, and he bites the sheriff in the neck. The sheriff stumbles back to the jail, and the mayor decides to talk to the vampire next. After a quick interaction, the mayor appears to be mind-controlled, and he offers for the vampire to stay in his house. Next, the reporter Newton speaks to the vampire, and after hearing that he's a reporter, the vampire tells him to follow him to get a juicy story. This vampire is actually Billy the Kid, and I have to say that I definitely missed that history lesson. I love how movies just take random historical people and try to tell us that they were something outrageous, like Abraham Lincoln being a vampire slayer. Then we cut over to Rayne riding majestically across the plains. Two things here. Did they really think that we wouldn't notice that Rayne is a completely different person? They could have given her a cool story to go along with the new look, but no. This is just Rayne now. Also, if you've ever played the video games that these movies are based on, this is the biggest possible leap. Rayne goes to the cabin from the night before, and she finds the parents dead in the snow. Suddenly, Pat Garrett pops up behind her, and he tells her that the kids are probably in Deliverance. Rayne immediately hops on her horse to ride for town, and Pat tries to form a team with her. She ignores him and rides for town on her own. That evening, she rides into town, and the sheriff greets her with a warning of no violence. Rayne heads for the saloon, and she gets a welcome that's anything but welcome from Flintlock Hogan. Rayne can see in the mirror that Hogan is actually a vampire, and she puts him in his place after he gets a little handsy. She lets him live for the time being, and she even sits to play poker with him and some others. Rayne and Hogan go into the street to settle things, and they have themselves a little duel. To everyone's surprise, Rayne not only beats him on the draw, but her bullets actually kill Hogan since her rounds are specifically for vampires. Just then, the sheriff shows up to remind Rayne of the rules, but it's too late. He has the men prepare the gallows, and he tells Rayne that she has until midnight. She tries to fight back, but the sheriff knocks her out. When Rayne comes to, Newton appears in the jail to ask her some questions for his story. Rayne decides to ask him her own questions about Billy the Kid and the rest of the town. Newton really can't tell her too much since Billy controls him, but another inmate speaks up. Muller wants to know why she's so interested in Billy's plans, but Rayne keeps her cards close. Hey, Muller has a brimstone necklace on, one single tied to the first film. That's literally all we got to connect the two so far, other than them showing Kagan's castle in the very first image of the title sequence. I guess they had to connect the two one way or another. This is a push, seeing how Brimstone was destroyed in the last film. Muller tells Rayne that he's been tracking Billy since Cheyenne, and he tells her that Billy doesn't even have to drink blood to regenerate. He believes that Billy is actually one of the oldest vampires he's ever seen. He tells her that he had a partner at one point, but Billy caught him and killed him. He figures that the vampires are waiting for the railroad to come into town so that they can send out fresh vampires all over the country. Suddenly, bartender Bob shows up and tells them that the gallows are almost done being built. Newton expects Muller and Rayne to fight, and Bob tells them that he actually managed to get a hold of Rayne's swords. Now, two lackeys come in and take Muller to the gallows first. Back at the mayor's house, Billy goes to the kids, and he takes hold of Sally, who he sits on his lap. He then feeds on her, and he makes the other kids watch. Outside, Muller is being dragged to the gallows, and Rayne watches him hang while she waits her turn in jail. Next, they go to retrieve Rayne, and they string her up with a noose. As the mayor reads the charges, Billy shows up with one of the children from the cabin, and he calls out Rayne's name just as they go to hang her. Luckily, Rayne's already slipped out of her cuffs, and she manages to go free. Bob tosses her swords, and she slices the sheriff's throat before leaping into the marsh. Once Rayne escapes, Billy shoots Bob dead, and the townspeople head back to town. Meanwhile, Pat helps Rayne to shore on the other side of the marsh, and he takes her to his camp, where he gives her medicine. Pat lets Rayne feed off of him, and they pack up camp to go find some other guns to help them take Deliverance back. They head to a random church in the woods, and Pat tells her that they're there to recruit the criminal called the Preacher. When they go inside, they find that the preacher's giving a sermon, and his antics cause the congregation to fear damnation enough to donate money to the cause. Once the sermon is over, Preacher goes through the offering plate to count up his money, and he finds the wanted poster that Pat left in it. Rayne starts to give him potential options for getting out of trouble, but once Preacher hears that they're going to kill a bunch of vampires, Preacher doesn't think twice about joining them. I can't really blame him. You wouldn't have to blackmail me. We're gonna go around to be vampire hunters? Yeah, let's go. Where do I sign up? Next, they head to a brothel where Rayne plans to work her magic on their next recruit. Once she finds Franson's room, she pretends to be one of the hookers of the house, and she ties him up to the bed frame. He thinks that this is all part of the fantasy, until she pulls out her gun and puts it in his mouth. He's confused when he hears that she wants to kill with him, and when he hears that she's hunting vampires, he gets even more confused. Yet once again, he agrees to be part of the crew just as easily as Preacher did. This is a ragtag group for sure. They definitely ripped off the Magnificent Seven. This is more like the Fantastic Four instead. Still a better Fantastic Four movie than the Fantastic Four reboot. When the crew camps for the night, Pat brings out silver bullets and garlic, and Preacher takes some water and blesses it. Back in town, the mayor tries to console Bob's widow, but he knows that they're no match for the vampires outside. The mayor believes that if he told Billy that the railroad wasn't coming through the town anymore, Billy would leave, but that's not good enough for the widow. Even Newton tells the mayor that this is a bad idea. Just then, Rayne and the others ride into town and hitch their horses. As the posse walks through the street, the widow spots them, and she tells the townsfolk that Rayne has brought help this time. While Rayne and the others wait in the street, the church bell tolls midnight, and Pat calls Billy the Kid to the street. Obviously, Billy doesn't just come on out. Now we get a good old-fashioned Wild West shootout where the main protagonist can simply walk down the street without really getting hit while she takes out literally every other vampire in the town. Then it starts raining. These vampires are not supposed to be able to get wet. Follow your own rules! As the townsfolk watch the posse take on the vampires, the widow wants to go outside to help them, but the mayor stops her. Meanwhile, Rayne is inside the mayor's house, and she can hear the children behind one of the doors. After taking out another vampire, she opens the door to see that she activated a trap. She finds Billy sitting in a chair, and she's holding a rope that's attached to the children. If she doesn't want the kids to hang, she can't let go of the rope. Going after kids automatically makes you a scumbag, but this is ingeniously dirty. When you've really got to win, tactics might change, and Billy manages to play as dirty as it gets. Back in the saloon, Newton believes that the rest of the townsfolk are cowards for not going out to help take back their town. But after his invigorating speech, others follow him. Back with Rayne, Billy decides to feed on one of the children, and he tries to talk Rayne into joining him in a feast. Outside, Preacher and Franson are clearing out the barn, but they end up getting ambushed by a handful of vampires. Inside, Billy tells Rayne about his plan for using the railroad to have an endless supply of food and soldiers, and he continues to try and recruit her for his cause. Rayne holds true to her beliefs though, and she tells him to back off. Meanwhile, Pat makes his way up the stairs to the back door, and Preacher and Franson are getting ready to face the vampires that are gunning them down. With one last smile, the two men fire on the vampires, but the Gatling gun manages to hit them back. Franson dies immediately, but Preacher manages to find some cover after getting hit a few times. Preacher manages to take out the Gatling gun lackey, and he runs into the streets. He gets shot again by the two men that follow him out of the barn, but the mayor and Newton come out of the saloon to save him. In the process, the mayor gets shot, but Preacher pulls out a silver stake and kills the remaining vampire. Newton, on the other hand, runs back into the saloon to gather the other townsfolk. Meanwhile, Rayne manages to cut the kids free with one fell swoop, and she locks blades with Billy. Back outside, Preacher's faced with one more vampire, but it turns out that he's run out of bullets. The vampire shoots him down, but then the widow comes out and shoots the vampire down herself. So the town rallied when there was only one vampire left? Real smooth. Suddenly, Billy knocks Rayne out into the street, and he beats her down in front of the townsfolk that are standing against him now. He addresses the people after leaving Rayne in the mud, but he never expected Rayne to get back on her feet. The two of them rush each other one more time, and Rayne manages to break his blades. Now Rayne is free to start slicing into Billy, but he cheats and pulls out his revolvers. Just as he gets ready to shoot her down, Pat pops up out of the barn door with the Gatling gun firing at Billy. Billy starts to bleed out in the street, and Rayne takes a wooden handle and drives it through his heart to finish things. I should be happy that at least Pat survived with Rayne, but honestly, I would have been happier if Preacher had made it. Out of the entire cast, Preacher was the best part. At least he had a really awesome death scene. Actually, his death scene was way more powerful than Billy's. The next day, what's left of Deliverance tries to piece things together, and it turns out that Newton is the new sheriff of the town. Rayne gets ready to ride out to Tombstone, and Pat offers to ride along. Rayne simply rides off alone as she always does, and Pat stays behind with Newton. Then, the credits roll. bloodrayne had so much potential, and it actually pulled off some really good moments from time to time. Deliverance was definitely a weird addition to the series, though. If you thought this was crazy, just wait until she faces Nazis next. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.